Welcome to Voodoo Whiskey Gaming, and this is my late review of Dark Cloud. I played it on the PS4 because it's a PS2 game that is available on the PS4. So this is just kind of an old game that I wanted to talk about. So firstly, the story goes that there is a group in the east, and they summon a dark genie, or the dark genie, I'm not sure if there's more than one. And they basically use it to go and fuck up other places. Fortunately, however, the Fairy King steps in. Yeah, I know, there's a Fairy King. Before any of the houses or people or dogs and all that stuff can actually be destroyed, he is able to trap them in things called Atla, and then he gives you the power to release them from those Atla and then rearrange them how you need to and all that jazz. And by you, I mean Toad, who is the main character, and he basically goes on an adventure to stop the Dark Genie. The story isn't anything too special, but it is enjoyable enough. The way it is told could be a little more interesting, but this is also a PS2 game, so it's a little more acceptable the way it is told, which is mostly through speech bubbles. Now, as for the audio, since I just said speech bubbles, you can guess that there is no voiceover work. Or at least none that I have heard, apart from like the grunts and whatnot of you trying to fight, etc. The real audio is in the music and the sound effects for the world that you are in. And they actually do a pretty good job. I mean, it's not as in-depth as you would find in a modern game, but for what it was, they do a good job. The music does get a bit repetitive after a while. I do wish there was more, obviously, but once again, this was much more limited because of the generation that it was on. Now, as for the gameplay is where this game really stands out in my opinion and is quite unique. So as I said, the cities have been put in these Atla, and you need to go find these Atla and release them, and you get to like remap and rebuild the cities to make them exactly what everybody in the city would want, as well as put together everybody's houses the way they had them, want them, etc. So that's neat. But where do you find the Atla? You find them in dungeons, and that's where this game gets cool, or at least for the time. It was a randomly generated dungeon. There were multiple floors, there was a set number of floors, but every time you go into that floor, it's got a completely different map than the time before. So that was really cool. It's a 3D dungeon crawling RPG, I guess? That's where my true enjoyment from this game comes from, is I enjoy playing the game. I enjoy exploring and fighting in the dungeons. Admittedly, the combat is fairly simplistic. You do have a few moves, but generally it's pretty hack and slash. Another cool element to this game is that there are multiple playable characters and you can switch them not quite on the fly, but pretty easily. When we switch from one to another, each has a different fighting style, essentially, because they have a different base weapon. Toan has a sword, Zhao has a slingshot, Goro has a big-ass hammer or axes. You get the idea. This game also does, and a lot of people would consider this a negative, it has degrading / breakable weapons. Normally that'd be a really big negative, but this game gives you enough weapons and you can repair them fairly easily and fairly cheaply. So if you actually break a weapon, it's on you for not paying attention. It's on you for not switching to a new weapon that hasn't been damaged. It's on you for not repairing it. It's on you for not having enough of the repair powder. I won't say that I like it, but I do think they did a good job of countering that mechanic. One thing that Dark Cloud does that's very interesting as an RPG is that it doesn't have a traditional leveling system. You can find items that will increase your defense, your thirst meter, and your health, but what really it boils down to is the weapons and leveling those up. You can get things to attach to those weapons that will enhance those stats, but then as the more monsters you kill with that weapon, it gains experience and can level up, and once you level it up, those attachments become permanently a part of that weapon. So I think that was a cool thing that they did, to differentiate themselves from a traditional RPG. Now the controls. I gotta say that they are far from perfect, which is a bit of a bummer. They're really sensitive and it takes some getting used to. Once you've gotten used to them, they work quite well. During combat and the like, I found them to be plenty responsive. When I'm moving around, like I said, a little bit too sensitive. The only time I felt like they weren't responding well is when I was trying to go into menus. When I'm hitting the triangle button to open my menu to grab a healing item or repair a weapon or something like that, it would not always work the first try. But when I was attacking and dodging and locking on, that all worked very well. Lastly, the graphics. Obviously, this is a PS2 game. This was a pretty early PS2 game, as I recall, so graphically, it's far from the best looking thing you're ever gonna see. But I do love the colorful world and the character design and the creature design. I love the dungeon design. I like the world that they built. I think what they did works very well. I think it's neat. I like the style. But again, if you're all about those pretty graphics, this game has not aged great visually. Okay, so to wrap this up, I enjoyed it. It's not as good as I remember it being, but I still was able to have a lot of fun playing it. I really do love these PS2 games on the PS4. It's fun to go back and play some of these older games. I wish they did a lot more backwards compatibility on the PS4, because there are still games that I want to replay, but can't at this point in time. That being said, it's a pretty cheap game, and it's worth picking up if you just want to play something old school. Okay, so in the comments below, why don't you tell me what PS2 game you'd like to see on the PS4? And as always, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button, and if you like what I'm doing in general, share or subscribe. Have a good one.